Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with my Glacier Frostbite build guide. I'm on a bit of an ailment build guide spree, and so this is my second Frostbite build guide in a row. I think I'm going to make one more after this, but it's a really good opportunity for me to see how each of these Frostbite builds perform relative to each other. With this one in particular, Glacier, you can see that Julra kill is pretty decent. It's worse than the Lightning Blast build, so single target is definitely a little bit worse. But AoE is better, tankiness is better, so this build can definitely perform better at higher corruption mono. So essentially we have a trade-off of weaker single target for better AoE, better tankiness, and slightly better mobility. But anyways, let's check it out. Irashaimase! Alright, so let's go through the actual build guide. And with this one, I'm going to try and go through it a little bit faster. I'm going to skip through a lot of the details that I've already covered with my previous Frostbite Lightning Blast build guide. So if you feel like I'm skipping too many details, please go ahead and check that one out, because I really want to try and get this one to be under 20 minutes preferably. So let's jump right in, starting with skills. In particular, Glacier is going to be one of our primary damage sources. And with this one, the main components here are reducing the mana cost as much as possible, and it's okay to remove the last explosion because we are running a Frostbite build. So all of the 350% damage effectiveness doesn't really apply to our Frostbite, so we don't care about dropping that last explosion in as a trade-off for getting 80% reduced mana cost. We don't want to take Cold Snap because mana is too big of a problem for the build. Max breaking point for mana efficiency, and then max every single more damage multiplier, in particular these three over here. The coolest thing about the build is this static collapse right here. Crits no longer deal extra damage, however we don't care about that because we're running a Frostbite build. And so generally when you're running a crit Glacier build, this node is a non-starter, you can't take it. But with this build, it's a must-have. You can place your Glacier anywhere you want. And we're actually going to try and stack at least some crit chance in order to get some mana back. It makes the build a lot smoother. I've tested it out, and we already have a lot of extra points anyways. The only thing that we're missing is 1 point in lesser destruction. This is, if you can get one more point for the build, this is where it goes. And after that, you don't really need any more points. Points into Mordita's Bane don't do anything because they only apply to hit damage, so that means they do not apply to ailments. Same as Endless Frost, that extra bonus does not apply on ailments. The extra damage bonuses from Rhymecaster are additive to our Elemental Dot and to our Freeze Rate multi, so it's not really worth the investment. So yeah, basically you just need one more extra point to make this the perfect skill tree here. Next we have Ice Barrage, and it's pretty much the same build setup as what we had for Lightning Blast. The only thing I would mention is I've taken out Wintry Blast because we now have a more reliable AoE source in Glacier, where previously we had a single target Lightning Blast, so we needed more AoE. In this case we do not, and taking this out actually reduces the mana cost for Glacier quite a bit. It makes the build smoother, and it gives you more single target, because in this case, in this build, we actually need a little bit more single target, more so than we need AoE. So those are the main differences with Ice Barrage. Runic Invocation is pretty much the same. Frost Wall is a little different. We no longer proc Lightning Blast, so that's notable. And instead of that, we just max out Frostbite, we max out area and duration, and we get a little bit of damage over time per second of existence. Nothing too crazy here. And Flame Ward is identical as well. So that's it in terms of skills. Nothing too noteworthy here other than the few small differences in Ice Barrage and obviously exchanging Lightning Blast for Glacier. Now let's cover itemization. I'm running the same two-handed sword with Armor Shred tier 7 on hit. And again, the main thing to note here is you want ideally to replace that melee attack speed with cold damage % prefix. And that would be a really solid two-handed sword. If you want suggestions for best implicits on your main weapon, go ahead and check out my Lightning Blast video. Otherwise, I'm not going to cover it here. For chest, I'm running the exact same chest piece, and it's pretty much the same rules apply as previously. You want to be getting cold pen with Frostbite for your prefixes. Ideally, one of those can be sealed, either the chance to apply Frostbite or the cold pen with Frostbite. They don't scale as well from tier 1 to tier 5, so sealing them is a really good idea. Getting a Ice Barrage prefix is not bad because it also gives you freeze rate multiplier, which scales both of your Glacier and your Ice Barrage Frostbites. So you can consider getting that one at tier 1 sealed or at tier 5 as a primary prefix. For your helmet, it's same as previously. Frostbite on hit, cold pen with Frostbite. You can think about sealing one of those and getting something else like maybe tier 5 mana or tier 5 int. And that's the other thing I want to mention with this version of the build is we actually spec'd into intelligence a lot more than in the previous scenario. So you can see I have some int in this ring. I also try to get a lot more CDR and all attributes from an Opal ring. And so that's one of the main differences I wanted to highlight is having more intelligence. It comes more so from passives than from items. But even in items, you can see I'm making slight adjustments to get more int in order to get more crit chance and more CDR, as well as ward retention. We're also getting some mana regen, as you can see, in order to make the build smoother. Otherwise, we frequently end up without sufficient mana regen and we just run out of mana. And in this case, we do not have an option to cast a skill at negative mana, like we did with Lightning Blast. So we really want to make sure we do not go into the negatives. I got a small upgrade in my amulet recently. You can see that I have tier 7 armor shred, elemental dot, freeze rate multi, cold res, and even implicit freeze rate multi on the item itself. So this is kind of the dream amulet. The only upgrade to think about is tier 7 armor shred, but it is just really solid overall. You can also consider getting a tier 1 Glacier. I think it seals into the chest piece just to max out the skill. But otherwise, yeah, same as usual. In terms of idols, we no longer use the cast speed when having lightning ages because we're not casting Lightning Blast anymore. So instead, we can run Cold Pen with Frostbite. That gives us more damage. You can also switch them to defensive idols as well. That's probably a really solid option. I've personally been dying a lot to poison because of my low poison res. So it's probably a really good idea to switch these out to poison res in my scenario. But yeah, they're not as high of a value as the cast speed when you have lightning ages because we already have a lot of cold pen with Frostbite through the freeze rate multiplier bonus that these snowdrifts give us. And we still want the duration, we still want the Throne of Ambition. Those are same as previously. I would recommend keeping the same blessings as my Lightning Blast video. Leech rate here so that we can sustain better the Twisted Heart of Eukaros. Freeze rate multi for the cold pen. All res and double armor between these two nodes. It's in the passive tree that we have made the most adjustments for this build relative to the Lightning Blast build. With this iteration, we're aiming to get as much int as we can from the passive skill tree in order to get some crit chance, because our Glacier actually has a 17% base crit chance. That's without any spell crit chance bonuses. And it's pretty easy to scale that up to something like 50%, let's say, through just having some int. If you have like 50 int-ish, that's 150% increased crit chance. And let's say you have a little bit of crit chance here as well. And I would say this node is pretty solid overall, just because Mage does not have a culling ability. So it can struggle a little bit with endurance of bosses. Killing that last 15, 20, 30% of the bosses. And this node helps quite a bit for those purposes. So yeah, get more int through here, get more int and crit chance through here. We actually get a little bit of mana as well, and mana regen. We drop the freeze rate multipliers from the Spellblade skill tree. They're not the most value, I have to say, so that's all right. Edict of the Scion is actually high value here because Glacier is considered an area skill. So it's a very valuable node to take this one. Make sure to have 6 points. And then again, more int, more crit chance, more int here as well. And that's about it. Overall, we have 46 int, even though we're running just a single int item in this opal ring. Nothing else gives us int. And you can see spell crit chance is 16, which essentially for Glacier should be equivalent to somewhere about 50-55%, which is a significant mana management boost thanks to critical rejuvenation. Ideally, you want to have a little bit more mana than we do here. 246 is not enough. I think around 300 should be better. And yeah, that's about it for the passives as well. The playstyle is pretty similar to what we had previously. Get your runes, get one frost wall, teleport on top of it. That means you always have flame ward permanently, and then cast your Ice Barrage and, you know, cast Glacier as necessary. But honestly, Ice Barrage is gonna kill most enemies. And now let's check out the final tier list. Here's the build up here: Runemaster, Frostbite, Glacier. We killed Julra in 40 some seconds, so 40 to 50 seconds is definitely doable. I think even shorter than that is definitely feasible with better itemization. So I put it at A-. The only drawbacks here are the mobility as well as the kill speed, but it can definitely be upgraded to probably A+ with some minor improvements. In terms of monoliths, you can certainly do 500 plus corruption. This build is very strong for monos. You can cast Glacier and almost off-screen enemies. Ice Barrage off-screens enemies from 2 screens away. It's one of the best off-screening skills in the entire game. Mobility is slightly better just because of better cooldown reduction than what we had with Frostbite, Lightning Blast. The tier overall for monoliths, thanks to better survivability as well as better AoE, I put it at S-. You could make an argument for S+, but I think the mobility is what really holds it back. Even survivability, you can make an argument that it could be higher, and you can even spec into better survivability as well. Multiplayer utility is B. Cost to itemize is the same as before, A-. So final tier, I put it at A+. The way I would position it is certainly a better monolith clearing build and a worse single target build. So overall, depending on your purpose and depending on what you're trying to accomplish in the game, you can choose what build fits better your playstyle, perhaps. I think Frostbite Glacier might be a slightly better build in the current meta because monolith farming is a very good way to acquire items right now. With the introduction of chests as well as exiled mages, it's probably a better farming option. So yeah, that's the final verdict for the build. And that's the end of the build guide. I'll leave you with a Corruption 424 clear while we wrap things up. And I want to mention a few thoughts that I had, especially as I was going through the final verdict for this build. I did get the sense that with all the new item additions over the last, let's say, 9 months, as well as new classes being introduced with new passive skill trees, upgrades to existing items, I do feel like we've had a bit of an inflation on the power level of a lot of the builds that we have. What used to be S tier, I feel like is no longer S tier. It might now be S-, because there are now new builds that can do even higher corruption and perform even better against bosses. So I was considering, I haven't done it yet, but I was considering dropping every single tier in my build tier list by 1 tier in order to give me more room to more accurately grade new builds and their performances at various tasks within the game. Anyway, just something to think about. Let me know what you guys think on that topic. Do you feel like we've had an inflation? And do you think there has been a bit of a power creep since 0.9? And maybe even more so with 0.92? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, as usual, if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, join me on Twitch. Next, I will be doing one more Frostbite build. I have a couple of ideas to try out, so we'll see what we land on. But more importantly, I'm just trying to gauge the relative power level of various Frostbite options. And with that, thank you all for the support. Much appreciated. Take it easy and gochiso sama deshita.